So I'm someone who's already always followed my passions. I studied Indonesian in high school, and I was keen to continue studying the language. But my legal studies teacher, who was a very kind and generous person, suggested I should also study law. So I went to Melbourne University. I was from what was called an underrepresented school, which simply meant that no one else from my school really went to Melbourne University. So it was a fairly steep learning curve. And certainly a difficult first year, but I persisted, and I think in part that's what law school is about, and what gets you through. But I then stayed in law, I think, because I was fortunate to be part of a community at Melbourne Law School, which somewhat idealistically called ourselves Law Students for a Just Community. This was at a time when the Melbourne Law School had just moved into a big, quite corporate-looking grey office building, 10 stories or so, and we were trying to bring a bit of life and community into the law school, and it was also at a time when the Law Society, the Law Student Society there, didn't actually have a social justice portfolio, and so the group that we started ended up becoming, a few years after that, the social justice portfolio of the Law Students Association. At that time I was into fair trade, and that was sort of the thing that I was campaigning on a lot. But being part of that broader community really helped. I think the other thing was that I got the opportunity as a student to do an internship in Indonesia. That was with the state level ombudsman, which at the time was the first office of the ombudsman in Indonesia. And it was quite a remarkable time because the place where it was located, Yogyakarta, that is in a province that is a sultanate, so still headed by the sultan, and he was actually implicated in a large telecommunications scandal, which the ombudsman was investigating, and the kind of big breakthrough at the time was that the sultan agreed to come to the office of the ombudsman to be questioned and investigated by the ombudsman in relation to this particular scandal. So that was a fascinating insight as a student, I think. And then just the last was I was involved as a research assistant at the Asian Law Centre at Melbourne Law School, and that was a great opportunity because I couldn't quite believe that someone would pay me to do research on Islamic law. I think, from my perspective, law is definitely a generalist degree in some sense, in that it can set you up for a wide range of pathways, and I think that's one of the beauties and great strengths of a law degree. I mean, it's certainly great for those who do go on to become lawyers, but I think there's a range of other exciting pathways that are, just waiting to be explored. So I guess it depends how you classify interesting achievements. Some might say meeting Aung San Suu Kyi, and certainly that was, a highlight and a very daunting experience and one I won't forget. But I think for me there are a range of other achievements. So things like a collaborative book project that I did a couple of years ago on Islam and Muslims in Myanmar, which in its own right has generated a lot of attention, I think. But really for me the achievement in that is the group of people that I was able to bring together, and many of the collaborators have said that really that book helped make their career, and many of them have gone on to become really good friends, and are people who I still very much collaborate with and connect with in research and academia more broadly. So the context was the Australia-Myanmar Constitutional Democracy Project that Martin and others in the faculty have been working on for a while, where we go to Myanmar each year and hold a workshop on constitutional law. This was an initiative sort of prompted by Aung San Suu Kyi. So it was actually a professor from Sydney who initially met with her and sort of said, how can we help, back in 2012? And she said, well, I want to focus on constitutional reform. Can you, come along and do some workshops to get people talking and informed and aware about constitutional issues? So at the very first one in 2013, she came along. I was the junior person on the team at the time, and I got the gig of talking about emergency powers and the military, which was perhaps the most sensitive topic that nobody else wanted to talk about. And I didn't necessarily have, let's say I did a lot of work in a very short space of time to make sure I felt prepared. So she was in the audience. So one, that seminar and teaching experience was somewhat unusual, having her in the front row. But it was at a particular time in Myanmar when there had a state of emergency had been declared in a particular area where there had been significant violence against Muslim communities. And what happened was, so that was a decision by the president, but then a couple of months later it went to Parliament, and Parliament had to decide whether they would renew that state of emergency or not. And Aung San Suu Kyi was in Parliament at the time, and so I happened to be in Naypyidaw, and so she asked to meet, and we talked about what the considerations are in terms of, how should Parliament be responding to the president's request to extend this state of emergency. And my basic bottom line was that, well, you need to ask the military what's been happening there. Is there still a need for the military to be there? And if not, then there doesn't need to be an extension. I think the significant thing at that point, if you look at the parliamentary records, is that, so that's essentially what the NLD did in Parliament and Aung San Suu Kyi, is the military initially was wanting an extension indefinitely, so without any timeline, but because it was very clear in the law that they couldn't do that, so the NLD insisted that it could only be extended for a set period of time, and so that was what happened. So after university, I did my articles of clerkship, which is what you had to do in Victoria at the time to become a lawyer. But I always kind of knew that that really wasn't what I was interested in. I was interested in doing research, writing, teaching, but didn't quite know how to combine all of those. But then sort of along the way discovered that you can combine all of those in academia. So I did the PhD after the clerkship, and then I went and had the opportunity to do some postdoctoral fellowships in the Netherlands and then in Singapore. And it was really in Singapore where they had already established a new Asian Law Centre. They had a new project on Myanmar, and so I was helping to coordinate some of the programs and collaborations that they had in Myanmar between 2012 and 2014 before I came here. So. I wish I knew. I think sometimes career-wise you don't quite know where you're going, or if you're going backwards, or if you're just stalling. I've just been working on a book, so hopefully that will come out in the next 6 to 9 months on the Constitution of Myanmar, and part of the purpose of that is to have as a resource for students and academics in Myanmar, as well as hopefully a broader intellectual contribution. I guess I see myself more in the Asian studies direction, where we often have a commitment to a particular place, particular languages, particular peoples, and so I certainly see myself working in the Southeast Asian region, whether it's Indonesia, Myanmar, or other places for the long term. I'm involved here with the Institute for Global Development, and I think there should be some exciting things happening again in the next few months and years on that. But otherwise, we'll see. Look, I've certainly made many mistakes. One early on was sleeping in for a clerkship interview. This was an interview with quite a top law firm that I was really looking forward to. But I had just come back from Indonesia the day before, and I hadn't quite factored in that I was pretty jet lagged. And I can actually remember waking up that morning to the phone call, and it was 11 o'clock, which was the time of the interview, and they said to me, "Oh, we're just wondering if you're coming in. Where are you?" "I'm in bed." That was not a good experience, but you certainly learn from that to make sure your alarm clock and everything else is set and ready to go on those occasions. Yeah. I think you should definitely follow what you're most interested in doing and figure out what you're not interested in doing and cross those off the list. So I very quickly realised I would not be a good barrister and I wasn't particularly interested in being a lawyer. Go and explore other things. I think also it's, you do have to try a range of different things to then figure out what it is you're most interested in doing. And I think just keep in mind that everybody's path is different, and so don't be distracted by what other people are doing or necessarily, but that your path might be distinct and unique in that sense.